Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. Today's webinar is on Special Relief Act. It's the part two of yesterday's webinar, wherein yesterday we were covering up to Section 25, and the session was taken by Baljinder Singh Sarasar. Today's session is the part two of it, wherein we'll be talking about Section 25 onwards of the Special Relief Act. And Dr. Gopal Ora sir is the one who is going to be taking today's session. One thing which I've been told by the academy that a lot of people were not able to stream or were not able to join this webinar yesterday for some technical reasons. I have shared the numbers of of my technical team. So if you could share this number in the groups, especially the system officers can share this number in the group. Anyone who's facing any challenge in connecting to this webinar can call on these numbers. If you see the chat, if you see the question answer section over there, I have already mentioned the numbers. One number is for Mohit Singh, which is 8130681114. I'll repeat, 8130681114. Another number is for Rajesh Raina, that is 98711 97117. 98711 97117. I think without this is one thing which we will talk about. The methodology will remain the same. First, Arora sir will explain the entire topic, and post his detailing, we will be receiving questions. I think without further ado, I would request Gopal Rao sir, who's the ADJ cum faculty member at Chandigarh District Academy. I would request you, sir, to please take this forum and start the session, sir.
Thank you so much, Chetanji. Good morning, everyone. First of all, I am thankful to the Honorable High Court and our worthy President for giving me this opportunity for leading the discussion on the topic of this Special Relief Act. Since this topic has been earmarked for the entire judiciary of the Punjab and Haryana, and I have learned so many things from my seniors, even from my juniors also. And basically, this platform is for the purpose of discussion. And I am not here to teach anything, but my main focus would be upon the challenging aspects of the Specific Relief Act from Section 26 to Section 42 of the Specific Relief Act, read with the provisions of the CPC that is pertaining to the injunction matters, basically, that is Order 39, and other relevant sections like Section 94, 95. Mr. Shah has already discussed about the remedies granted under this act. That is the two remedies. One is for the possession of the property. Second is pertaining to the specific performance of the contracts. And other reliefs are granted from Section 25 onwards. Section 25 pertains to the rectification of the contract. Section 26. Section 27 pertains to rescission of contract. Then Section 31 pertains to the cancellation of the instrument. Then Section 34 pertains to the declaration of the suit. 35 is the binding nature of the declaration. Then 36 onwards pertains to the injunction matters. Prior to this injunction matter, there are three remedies. That is, one is rectification, one is rescission, third is the cancellation. First of all, we'll try to distinguish the differences between these all terminologies. For the clarification of these terminologies, I want to share one example with you. Suppose A transfers his of B that is the plot land bearing number 33. B, who is the purchaser of the plot, tells A that I'll pay the amount and I'll also take the consent of my brother before the execution of the sale deed. Similarly, A also imposes a condition that I'll get the property recharged from the bank because it is under the charge of the bank. But somehow the agreement, when it was executed, the property number instead of 3338 has been written. Now B party approaches A party, but A party categorically says that I have transferred 33 number in favor of some other person and I agreed with you regarding the property bearing number 38 and it was not number 33. Then the person approaches to the advocate. Now in the capacity of advocate, if we think, the advocate asks from the party, that is B, what do you want? Whether you want to continue with this contract or you want the cancellation of this contract. And with this example, I'll try to distinguish between all these terminologies. For the purpose of rectification, the word has been used that if the agreement shows the different real intention of the parties and there should be a one element of fraud or the mutual mistake of the parties. Now the question arises, what is the mutual mistake of the parties? Basically, the definition of the Special Relief Act says the words which are not defined under this act, Contract Act would be used as it is. And for the purpose of this mutual mistake, now whether the mutual mistake can be said to be the common mistake or it may be the unilateral mistake. Now for the purpose of demarcation, the meaning of the mutual mistake which has been given the number of the judgments, that the mutual mistake means, suppose if I am having two cars, Toyota Corolla and Toyota Innova, and I want to sell my Toyota Corolla car, and the other party who is the purchaser of the under the belief that I am going to sell my Corolla car, Innova car. Both parties have misunderstood each other and their interests are crossed to each other. Whereas in the case of common mistake, what happens? In that category, suppose if I agree to sell my plot to party B and party B intends to purchase the same plot, our intentions are very much clear. But 2 days prior, that plot has been encroached by somebody else. But this fact is neither in the knowledge of me, neither in the knowledge of other party. So both the parties are mistaken, and that is the common mistake and the mutual mistake we have already discussed. And under English law, these terminologies are used differently. But under the Indian law, we use for the purpose of rectification of the contract, both are interchangeable. And in the case of unilateral mistake, that is the mistake of one party and knowingly he do this. So for the purpose of rectification of the contract, though the litigation is very small pertaining to this area, but we should be having the knowledge about what are the suit and what are the implications and how these ingredients are proved and what is the settled law on the proposition of this rectification of the instrument. Now coming back to the real intention and the mutual mistake or the fraud of the parties. This fact, as per the provisions of section 26, it should be incorporated in the pleadings. And if it has not been incorporated in the pleadings, then it can be incorporated in the pleadings by way of an amendment. Thereafter the amendment of the court. Now, who can challenge and where it can be challenged? It can be challenged by way of an independent suit. Either party or his representative in interest can institute the suit, or it may be the defendant. Suppose a suit for passive performance of agreement to sell, as in the given example we have already taken, is pending. And in that suit, now the plaintiff files an application for the rectification of the contract from number 33 to from number 38 to 33, indicating his real intention to the contract. Then first of all, the application for amendment would be filed, and the prayer would also be made for the correction of the rectification of the instrument also. But if the right in favor of third party, as in the given example, it has accrued, then it should be seen whether it is in good faith or for a consideration. And as per the judgment of Honorable Supreme Court in Puranram Paguram, in such like cases, it was observed that the rectification should be allowed if the interest of third parties are not acquired in good faith or for consideration or for the valuable consideration. What happened in that case? In that case, the dispute was regarding the identification of the property, and the application for the amendment, that was the case pertaining to the specific performance of the contract. An application for the amendment was filed, but the application was dismissed by the trial court on the grounds that he has not filed any application for the rectification of the contract. Then the matter went up to the Honorable Supreme Court, and it was observed that should be allowed in such like cases, and the rectification of the contract is automatic, because after the amendment of the pleadings, the instrument is automatically rectified, and then the proceedings under the relief for the specific performance would be continued. It was also one of the arguments that the amendment would change the nature of the suit, because the present nature of the suit is the suit for specific performance, whereas after the filing of the application, it would become the suit for the rectification of the contract. But it was rejected by the Honorable Supreme Court. Now the next question arises: who will challenge the real intention of the parties? Naturally, it is the contract. Only he can challenge the intention of the party, real intention of the parties, because in such like cases, the evidence led would be contrary to the written argument. In Joseph Jones' case, what happened? A father distributed his two houses, one in the name of his daughter and one in the name of his son. A bigger house was given to the daughter and smaller house was given to the son. After his death, dispute arose between the parties, and brother got one rectification deed from his sister that the real intention of the father was to give bigger house to his son and smaller house to his daughter. Then the daughter challenged that deed and also filed a suit for challenging that rectification deed. And the trial court allowed the request of the brother and declined the request of the sister. But the matter went up to the Honorable Supreme Court, and it was observed by the Supreme Court that the father of the parties was a real person who could challenge the real intention regarding the execution of the document. So it was all about this rectification of the contract. Then the next is the rescission of the contract. Because of rescission of the contract, now if the party wants to challenge that document by taking the plea that it is a viable and terminable contract at the option of one of the parties. Suppose purchaser says that this can only be executed because the condition was incorporated that first of all he will get the consent of his brother. Then for this purpose, under the provisions of section 27, there are three types of contracts. One is viable contract, second is terminable contract, third is unlawful contract. And the viable contract, as per the provisions of Contract Act, it pertains to section 19, section 19A, section 20, section 55, 156. Those are the provisions which govern the viable contracts. And the terminal contract, suppose if there is one condition and if that is not fulfilled, then it can be terminated at the option of one party. Third type of the contract is unlawful contract, which is illegal on the face of it, but the defendant is more to blame than the plaintiff. Suppose an attorney guides his client to transfer the properties in his favor just to discredit the claims of the credit holder person. And now in such like situation, the attorney who is having the knowledge about the law, he is at more fault. Suppose if both the parties are equally at fault, then the provisions of section 20 would not be applicable. And there are certain exceptions where it can be refused. Suppose if there is a ratification of contract, then it can be refused. And due to the changed circumstances, if status quo ante position could not be restored, then the rescission is not permissible. Suppose the third party in good faith and for valuable consideration has acquired rights, then this cannot be rescinded. Then fourth, if only the part of the contract which is going to be rescinded is not segregable from the rest of the contract, then it can be refused. Now section 28. This is very challenging area and this is very useful section for the purpose of the trial courts. Now if there is a decree has been passed for the specific performance of deed, but one party is at default, then the other party under section 28 can move for the rescission of the for extension of the time for the fulfillment of the conditions given in the decree. Then the trial court is bound to take consideration if the condition is fulfilled by the defaulting party, then the conveyance deed would be executed or the lease deed would be executed. If the contract is rescinded, then the possession would be restored, the money would be returned if it is permissible. Then the means profits and the other payments and compensation can also be granted to the seller party. Now the question arises, while rescinding the contract, whether we are complying with the provisions of section 28, because these are the provisions which are to be followed whenever Now, in the latest judgment, Surinder Pal Soni versus Sohanlal, what happened? In this case, the decree for specific performance of contract was uh, was passed by the trial court, and condition was incorporated that he will deposit the remaining amount within 2 months. The other party filed appeal before the learned appellate court, did not deposit the amount as per the conditions incorporated in the decree. Ultimately, when his first appeal was decided, he deposited the amount after 4 days. Then he filed the execution. In execution, the issue was taken up regarding the delayed or late payment of the main amount. His plea was rejected by the executing court. Order was upheld by the Honorable High Court. Then he went to the Honorable Supreme Court. While interpreting Section 28, it was held that under Section 28, it was the duty of the court to give the time to the party, because in this case, an application for the rescission of contract has not been filed by the other party, though no application has been filed by the plaintiff also. But the Honorable Supreme Court has held that the decree of the trial court has been merged into the decree of the appellate court. So he has deposited the amount within 4 or 5 days. So this is a compliance of the decree of the trial court. But it was argued that this is not a case of the merger of the decrees, because the decree cannot be merged in the decree of appellate court. But this argument was also repelled by the Honorable Supreme Court, and it was directed that the decree for the specific performance should be honored in this case. Now the next question arises. Section 28 says the court would extend the time. Now whether it should be the same court, that is the trial court, or it is the appellate court, or it is the executing court. Now I am posing this question to the audience, okay, whether the court means same court, appellate court, or the executing court. The answer would be, it would be the trial court, number one. Number two, the time can be extended by the learned appellate court also. But the executing court is not empowered to extend that. This controversy was resolved in Ramakuthi Gupta 1994 Supreme Court judgment, where the application was filed before the executing court for the extension of the time. Then that application was transferred to the regular court, and it was taken up by the regular civil court in the capacity of the civil court, not in the capacity of the executing court. So the application can be transferred, but since the executing court as well as the civil court, generally those are the same courts. As per 2020 judgment of our Honorable High Courts, it has been categorically held that no rider can be imposed such like judgments. Whenever the decree for the specific performance is granted, then if this amount has not been deposited within 2 months, then the judgment would be deemed to, then the suit of the plaintiff would be deemed to be the dismissal of the suit. Such like rider should not be imposed, because the provisions of Section 28 are very much clear. And even in another 2020 judgment, it has been categorically held that the no written application is required for the extension of the time. Even the court can extend the time on the oral submission of the plaintiff also. All about the Section 28. Section 29 says that the alternatively for the suit of specific performance, the rescission of contract can be sought. Section 30 provides the restoration of the other cases which do not fall under the category of this section 28. Then section 31 is pertaining to the cancellation of the contracts. Though technically there is no difference between this cancellation of contract or further rescission of the contract. But the area of cancellation of the contract is vast because the terminology used here is void or voidable contracts. And there must be an element of threat in the mind of any party that if this void or voidable contract is alive, then prejudicial to the rights of the parties. Then there is a limitation for challenging these contracts, that is within 3 years. And if it is a to be sent to the concerned authorities also. Now, whether we are complying with these conditions when we set aside any sale deed, whether we send the intimation to the concerned registrar, whether we restore the benefits as per the provisions of 33, section 33, these are the to be faced by the learned trial courts. As per the section 33, all benefits should be returned to the party whenever there is a cancellation of an instrument. Suppose if the defendant resists the claim and the instrument is declared for the purpose of cancellation, the court can declare this instrument as voidable or voidable. In Sundarnath's case, it has been held by the Honorable Apex Court that it does not matter if the instrument is declared as voidable or voidable, because the limitation for challenging these documents would be 3 years, because in the case of voidable, it would come under the provisions of Order 6, Rule 4 CPC, because it is the mandate to take these pleas in the pleadings. And for this purpose, if there is a plea of fraud, misrepresentation or undue influence, then the shape of the order would be this voidable. For the purpose of void transaction, it would come under the other provisions of the Contract Act, but the limitation would remain as it is, that is as per the section 59, that is 3 years. Now, for the purpose of restoration, there is a demarcation under section 33. Now, clause 1 says, if this document has been declared as voidable, then the benefits taken by the party, those should be restored to him. For the purpose of clause B, if it has been declared as void, for the purpose of contract, the any benefit under the agreement from other party require him to restore so far as may be such benefit to that party has been benefited thereby. Now the question arises here, suppose if with that money the minor has purchased, suppose minor has taken the consideration of rupees 1 lakh and he has purchased this property of 1 lakh at the relevant time. Now the value of that property is 1 crore. in the favor of the plaintiff. Now this is for you people to decide, because it has been the state has been benefited thereby. So for the purpose of restoration, I am leaving this question open for discussion purpose, whether he will transfer that house or whether he will return only rupees 1 lakh to the plaintiff. So this was all about the rectification of contract, rescission of contract, and the cancellation of the contract. And I think we are able to demarcate between these three terminologies, where this rectification of the contract can be allowed, where the rescission can be allowed, where the cancellation of the document can be allowed. And now in the first example, instead of house number 33, he has written 38. So the rectification can also be permitted. He can continue with that contract. Rescission can also be possible, because that was avoidable at the option of certain conditions. And for the purpose of cancellation, if if suppose the person is not the owner of the properties, then that can be declared as void transaction also. Now next we are coming to this declaration, section 35, sorry 34 and section 35. Now so far as these sections are concerned, we know number of cases under these sections are pending, and Mr. Sra has also described the declaration under this section is not exhaustive, because there is a provision of section 9 of the CPC also. Under this are given, one is title qua the right to property, second is title qua the legal character. If the case of the under this category, a suit against a person who is denying his title or is interested in denying his title. And there is also one clause which is very crucial clause, that is he has to sought the further relief, and if he omits to so, then the suit for declaration is not maintainable. And as per the provisions of section 35, the decree of declaration is only binding upon the parties. Now at this juncture, it would be relevant to demarcate the distinction between this declaration and the other reliefs we have already discussed. Generally, people file the suit for the rectification of the declaration that this document should be rectified, declaration that this contract should be rescinded, declaration that this document should be cancelled. Now, what is the demarcation then for the purpose of this declaration? No doubt the specific remedy has been provided, and it is now the bounden duty of the parties to file specific suit under those categories. This issue has been discussed for the purpose of court fee. Basically, the problem comes when we decide the issues regarding the court fee. Whenever the application under Order 711 comes, or other issues regarding the court fee comes before this court, then for this purpose it is relevant to discuss the judgment of Surhit Singh versus Randhir Singh, which is 2010 Supreme Court case. In that judgment, Honorable Supreme Court has discussed that if the executant of the document wants to challenge that document, then certainly he would challenge that document. Let us assume it is the sale deed. He would file the suit for the cancellation of the sale deed. And if any party is going to be affected by that person, that document, then he would file the suit for declaration that this document is not binding upon me. It is this is a void document. Then the question of court fee would come, though my topic is restricted to the I'll also touch the provisions of this. So the sale deed, if he is the executant, then he has to fix the court fee as per the provisions of Section 7 of the Court Fee Act. But if he is the non-executant and he is in the possession of that property, then he has to file only court fee for the purpose of the declaration. That is, the earlier it was 19.50, now it is, I think, rupees 50 lump sum fee. And if he is the out of possession, then he has to fix the court fee as per the provisions of Section 7 of the Court Fee Act. So for the purpose of this declaration and for the cancellation, this is the demarcation between these two aspects. Even this has been dealt with by our Honorable High Court in the latest judgment, 2020 judgment. This issue has been discussed. Now, what are the area which are confined to this right to property and the legal character? Right to property, these areas are very simple. No dispute regarding these. Suppose a person is claiming a title regarding some property on the basis of ancestral property, on the basis of this joint Hindu family property, or on so there is no dispute regarding these nature of disputes. The dispute arises when a person claims declaration regarding. Now, for the purpose of this legal character, first of all, we'll see these as per the law of jurisprudence. These are the factors we can say these person, that is issues regarding sex, minority, patria protest, that is the headmanship, then covertures, then celibacy, then mental defects, bodily defects, rank, caste, official position, race and color, slavery, profession, civil death, illegitimacy, heresy, then foreign nationality, then hostile nationality. So all the issues pertaining to these terminologies affect the legal character of the person. Issues regarding the marriages are to be dealt with by the family courts now. Now the question arises whether a civil suit, that is a declaration, is maintainable for declaring that the marriage is a void marriage. The answer has been given in this judgment by the Honorable Supreme Court in 2017 Samar Kumar Roy case, that suit for declaration matrimonial status of the parties, the marriage has never been taken place, is maintainable, then it is within the jurisdiction of the civil court to declare this marriage for under the provisions of section 11 or 12. Then the remedies is before the family court. Then suppose a person claims that he be declared as civil dead. Now the question arises whether it is touching the legal character of the person and declaration is maintainable. Earlier there was a dispute regarding this controversy because a person usually files civil suit under section 107 and 108 of the Indian Evidence Act that he be declared as dead. And the law was that section 107 and 108 are merely the presumptions. Declaration cannot be granted for this purpose. The declaration can only be granted as per the parameters given in section 34 of the Special Relief Act. But now in 2017, this Harpreet Kaur versus Surjit Kaur, The declaration granted by the civil court has been upheld by our Honorable High Court, and from the reading of this judgment, one thing is very much clear, that in this case the party has fulfilled the ingredients of section 34, because he has sought the declaration that he be declared as civil debt for the purpose of the properties belonging to so and so, meaning thereby there was a denial of some person, denial by some person. There was a dispute between the heirs of that deceased person. Suppose party comes before the trial court that because I want the declaration of the civil court for the purposes of that municipal committee records, or for giving this certificate to some department for showing that he has been dead. Now the question arises whether the declaration is maintainable in such like cases. When you will search the law on this point, so Delhi civil courts are giving the declarations on this score only in one cases, if there is a denial of some right pertaining to the parties. That by the Delhi court or by the Honorable Delhi High Court. This was I have taken few examples regarding the legal character and the right to the property. Otherwise, these very lengthy topics, and now I'll not touch these topics at length. Now, sometimes the problem comes before the trial courts that the party files the suit for declaration along with mandatory injunction, but the actual dispute involves is regarding the recovery of some amount. Then, in such like cases, it has been held that the declaration should not be granted and the suit for the recovery is maintainable. But sometimes court grants time for fixing the court fee, that this suit should be treated as a recovery suit. Then that is your discretion to convert the suit for declaration into the recovery suit. If the party is ready to give the court fee, then it hardly matters. That is merely the technical point for the purpose of this court fee. Now the next topic, for the purpose of this declaration, the dispute generally comes about this maintainability of the suit, number one. That is whether this declaration is maintainable as per this clause, this further relief I have left this relief. If the further relief has not been claimed by the parties, then the declaration is not maintainable. Number one, that is the to this suit for declarations. The second area is that this declaration is not maintainable under the provisions of Order 34. Then the provisions of Section 9 would come into play. Suppose if he has sought the declaration under Section 9, Section 9 of CPC is very much clear that the suit for declaration, the suit is maintainable if it is not barred by the provisions exclusive. This type of objection, maintainability of the suit, like in the electricity cases, electricity act cases, in arbitration cases generally under Section Act, we refer the matter to the arbitrator. Like in surfacey cases, the civil court has no jurisdiction to try the case. And another type, like in land acquisition cases, if there is a dispute regarding the title of the property, then the act are concerned regarding the acquisition, etc., those cannot be challenged before the trial court. So the list is not exhaustive basically. This is merely an illustrative list. The next regarding this court fee we have already discussed. Then this further relief clause. Further relief clause. Suppose if plaintiff has filed suit for declaration and consequently he has sought the relief of injunction. If injunction or consequent relief of possession, if it flows from the main relief of the declaration, then that relief cannot be granted because that relief is only on the basis of that declaration. If that relief has not been claimed by the plaintiff, then simple declaration is not maintainable. And if those reliefs are taken, then those are totally dependent upon the relief of the declaration. If the declaration is given, only then those reliefs can be given. But those reliefs cannot be taken as an alternative relief. If the plaintiff claims specifically that alternatively he is entitled for this relief, which is not connected with that part, that is not the necessary consequence, or it is not the consequential relief of the main part, then that can be given if it has been sought alternatively. But if it is linked with that main relief, then that cannot be given. Generally, we grant injunction, but we decline the relief of declaration. But these principles should be kept in mind while dealing with these problems. So next important judgment before touching the area of injunctions, because the next section 36 onwards are pertaining to the injunctions. Before discussing injunction, I would like to discuss this Anthula Sudhakar judgment, because this uh, uh, four principles laid down in this judgment. The first, hello, Chetanji, hello.
Sir, can you hear me now?
Yes, sir. There is some problem.
Yeah, I think your PPT has. Are you done with your PPT, sir?
PPT.
आपकी PPT sir दिखनी बंद हुई है. I think you have opened the team software, so that is showing on the screen. If you can just open the PPT again, sir. No, the sharing has been closed. Just click on that thing again. Click on the sharing icon again, sir. The same icon.
Yes, I think okay.
Yes, sir. Now it's okay, sir.
Now it's okay.
Yes, sir. It is okay, sir.
Sorry for this one. Now I would like to discuss this judgment. This Anathula judgment, the four principles are laid down by the Honorable Supreme Court in this judgment. This is pertaining to the relief of this declaration as well as the relief of possession and the relief of injunction. Now, first principle says, if there is a cloud regarding the title of the plaintiff, and plaintiff, suppose he is not in the possession of the suit property, file the suit for declaration and possession with or without the consequential injunction. He will file the suit for possession along with the consequential injunction. But the third, in the same point, the third element has been given, where there is merely an interference with the plaintiff's lawful possession or threat of dispossession, then it is sufficient to sue for an injunction simpliciter, meaning thereby there is no need for filing the suit for title. It is a simple suit of injunction only on the basis of possession. Directly or substantially in issue, then mere issue of injunction is to be decided by the court on the basis of possession. But if it is pertaining to the vacant site, because as per the law, all the vacant sites are belonging to the government until and unless other person claims his better title than vacant site, then he has to establish his title regarding that land also. Now the third, if there is a pleadings and this is only the exception to this clause. In this case, in this clause, court is required to give the findings regarding the title as well as the other issues involved in the case. It has also been written that if it involves a complicated questions of fact and law, then the party should be relegated to the suit for declaration, meaning thereby the amendment can also be allowed and the party should be relegated for the declaration. If it involves complicated questions of fact and law, the next clause is regarding this. If there is a pleadings of title issues, evidence has already been led, but simple and straightforward relief of injunction has been sought. The court says that even in such like cases, since there is a pleadings and issues and evidence has already been led, then the issue of title can be decided in the suit for injunction also. So this was all pertaining to this Anthula judgment, which is relevant for the purpose of this declaration, that is regarding title, possession, and as well as for the provisions regarding the grant of injunction are incorporated in these sections. So far as Passive Relief Act is concerned, that is section 36 onwards, which grants the provisions regarding this temporary injunctions, perpetual injunctions, mandatory injunctions, and where there is dual injunctions, that is positive contracts are involved. Now, before touching these provisions, I would like to touch the amended provisions of this Act, that is 2018 provisions. Number 1, Section 20A has been incorporated regarding infrastructure projects. Yesterday, Mr. Saran has also touched this Section 20A. Regarding the grant of basic injunctions in infrastructure projects. Infrastructure projects, these are specified in the schedule, given schedule to the Act. As per the Act, transport, energy, water and sanitation, communication and telecommunication, social and commercial infrastructures, that is housing, like hospitals, these are the basically infrastructure projects where the injunction cannot be granted if it hinders or impediments the progress or the completion of such project. There is only one rider has been given, but the power of civil court has not been taken away. Suppose if the project has been sanctioned and there is issue regarding the interference. Now the question arises whether injunction can be granted regarding this infrastructure project. No, it would all depend upon the circumstances of the case. Okay, what is the timeline for the completion of the project? What is the nature of the law now, like in the COVID-19 situation? Suppose if hospital is required to be constructed which is very urgent now in these days. So in such like cases, the injunction should not be granted. Even earlier also, whenever there is when the infrastructure projects pertaining to the governments are allowed, the courts are slow in granting injunctions in the government matters. So this section has been further qualified by giving section 41 has also been amended to some extent. Clause HA has been incorporated. Regarding infrastructure, the injunction matters has been covered under section 28A of the Act. It has also been a direction that the special courts would be constituted who will decide the matter within 12 months. Under the Commercial Act also. Now the commercial courts are functioning. Now either these matters should be decided by those special courts. The issue would be now by the Honorable High Court for the purpose of decision of these cases. Now there would be an overlapping of the provisions of this Commercial Act because there is also a definition of this infrastructure projects in the Commercial Court Act also. Again, coming back to the types of injunctions, one is perpetual injunction. First of all, there is one temporary injunction that is to be governed by the provisions of Order 39, and perpetual injunction, it is governed by the provisions of Section 38. There are certain parameters where it is to be given, where it is not to be given. 39 pertains to the mandatory injunction. Now, this is the injunction given for the prevention of the breach of an obligation. Obligation has defined in the definition part also. That is, it includes, the word says, it includes the duty enforceable by law. Meaning thereby, there are certain other obligations also. The word is includes the duty enforceable by law. So, for the prevention of breach of the obligations, the court is capable of enforcing. It is a discretionary relief. If the obligation is arising out of the contract, then naturally it is to be governed by the provisions of Chapter 2. When the defendant invades or threatens to invade the rights or the enjoyment of the property, then there are 4 parameters. Number 1, if the defendant is the trustee of the property. Second, if there is no standard for ascertaining the actual damages and the compensation of the money would not afford the adequate relief, then to prevent the multiplicity of the proceedings. But the general principles for granting the injunction, that is prima facie case irreparable loss, the balance of convenience, that is the same even for the perpetual injunction also. No doubt those are relevant for the purpose of temporary injunction. But as per the analogy of the law, these are also required for the purpose of granting this permanent injunction also. And also regarding this permanent or perpetual injunction, that it is only to be passed by way of the decree. For the purpose of this, if an application for temporary injunction has been governed by the provisions of Order 39. Now, this was about this perpetual injunctions. Now, mandatory injunction. It is to prevent the breach of an obligation, and in this case, direction that is to do certain acts. This is like I will say that is your undo button on your laptop or your computer. By undoing, we come status quo ante, and the same is the nature of this injunction. That is the undoing of the things, whether the earlier position can be restored. That is the main scope of the mandatory injunction. And the other provisions are similar for granting these injunctions. In this case, mandatory injunction direction is given for doing this act. Now, the question arises in this case, suppose party seeks ad interim mandatory injunction along with the mandatory injunction. Whether it would amount to the decretal of the suit? The answer is affirmative. Yes, it would amount to the decretal of the suit on merits. Suppose if ad interim injunction has been granted to the party, like party has come for the stoppage of nuisance, for the removal of illegal structure, removal of overgrown shoots, any act of the public authorities. Once the direction is given, then it would amount to the decretal of the suit. So this is the now law of the our honorable apex court, that the court should be slow in granting the mandate, but in appropriate cases it should be granted. Now in the latest judgment, Hamad Ahmad, it is 2020 judgment. The Hamdard Dawakhana case is pending before the Delhi Civil Court. In that case, Mutawali has been appointed arose for granting the ad interim mandatory injunction to the party for operating the computer systems, the passwords, and for releasing the salary to the Mutawali. That application was dismissed by the trial court on this score, but the Honorable Apex Court this recently in the month of May has allowed that application, that in appropriate cases, suppose in that case there was also a direction to operate the bank accounts, to share the password, to give salary to the Mutawali. Ad interim mandatory injunction can be given, it can be allowed. Now again, whether this mandatory injunction can be allowed in the cases of this specific performance cases, instead of filing suit for specific performance, whether plaintiff can file suit for mandatory injunction directing the defendant to sale deed. Similar suit has been filed in the court. The other party had taken the objection. Afterwards, the learned trial court, in his proactive approach, directed the plaintiff to affix the requisite court fee on the basis of subject matter involved in that case. But the nature of suit was suit for mandatory injunction. Ultimately, that matter went up to the Honorable Apex Court. And the Apex Court has observed like this. A shortcut was found by the petition. This is this 10th February 2020 judgment. A shortcut was found by the petitioner plaintiff to retain the plaint as such, but to seek permission to pay deficit court fee, as though what was filed in the first instance was actually a suit for mandatory injunction. Such a dubious approach should not be allowed, especially in a suit for specific performance, as the relief of specific performance is discretionary under Section 20 of the Specific Relief Act. So please be aware like these situations. Now the next question, whether suit for mandatory injunction is maintainable against the licensee to give the possession. The answer would be in affirmative. But there is one condition also, that the suit must be filed in promptitude after the termination of the license. Now again the question would arise, okay, what is the limitation period? If it is compared with the provisions of Limitation Act, then there is a limitation of 3 years for filing suit for mandatory injunction. Whether that is the limitation, this is also an open question for you to decide. License. Next, whether mandatory injunction lies for giving the direction to the government to release the salary of an employee, or whether it is a suit of this suit for recovery suit is maintainable. Earlier, there was a judgment of our Honorable High Court. Such like direction cannot be given in such like cases. But now, law, there are these judgments of our Honorable High Court that in such like situations, mandatory injunction can be given. Now it is to take your own opinion whether to grant this mandatory injunction or not mandatory injunction in such like cases. Now this is another important judgment touching the area of this mandatory injunction. Because under section 39, there are two elements. One for granting injunction and to compel to do certain things. So both the areas are including in section 39. In this Maria Margadia judgment, this was pertaining to the injunction of a caretaker, servant kept in the house. It is pertaining to the very important properties of Goa, that is the royal properties pertaining to the persons. In this case, the law was laid down, that is, when a person claims possession, what should be pleaded in the pleadings. Now on the point of possession, Ramegowda judgment is also relevant for this purpose, which gives the directions regarding the established possession, and this judgment is also relevant for the purpose of the pleadings. Now these are the parameters which are to be incorporated in the pleadings. Then who is or are the property? Title, title, in whose favor the title of the property is? Who is in the possession of the title documents? And what is the identity of the claimants who are claiming the possession? Entry, what is their date of entry into the possession? How they come into the possession, whether they have purchased the property, whether this property has been gifted, whether the property has been rented out. If it is rented out, then there must be a rent deed. If it is license fee, if it is on lease, whether there is any lease amount or lease deed is there. And the subject should also be taken into consideration. This is about the matter of the pleadings. But generally, we see I am in possession of this land since long. Vague pleadings I possession may be protected. I came into this possession in the year somewhere in the year 2002, and from the pleadings we can judge what is the status of this party who is coming with these pleas, whether it is in consonance with the directions given in this judgment. So it is all the duty of the learned court to see all these things. So I have touched this perpetual injunction, this mandatory injunction, then section 41. These are the gives the instances where the injunction cannot be allowed. Section 42 pertains where the positive or the negative contracts are involved, but a direction cannot, suppose injunction cannot be granted for doing the positive acts, but for the negative part, the injunction can be granted. That is the scope of the 42. Now I'm coming to the temporary injunctions. For the purpose of temporary injunctions, I think I have already taken sufficient time, but I think this is also very important topic for the purpose of trial courts, and this is also related with these the provisions of specific relief act. So I would like to touch the provisions of order 39 also.
So,
now for the purpose of Chetanji, kindly call. Hello.
so tell me, sir. So tell me, sir.
Kindly call Aman.
Aman, I'll call it. So you carry on. I'll call Aman, sir.
So for the purpose of this temporary injunctions or general injunctions, I have collected certain judgments. I think we should keep these judgments in our drawer. Like this Maria Margida judgment, Ramegoda judgment, that is judgment pertaining to the licensee. Now this Punaram judgment, State of Jharkhand Surinder Kumar judgment, these are the latest judgments of the year 2019 where Ramegoda judgment has been affirmed. And then this Dr. Syed Afzal, this 2020 judgment that the interim mandatory injunction cannot be granted without giving opposite party. This is also very much relevant. This judgment Saketa Vaksana, this is 2019 judgment where now the issue of alienation, that the relief of injunction pertaining to the alienation where the stay has been granted regarding the alienation, it has been upheld by the Honorable Supreme Court. This Hamad Ahmed case regarding mandatory injunction I have already discussed, Hamdard Dawakhana case. This Bachad Nahar case, this is pertaining to the easementary rights, because in injunction matters sometimes the parties claim easementary rights also. Now in easementary rights, what is the nature of easement? What is the type of this easement? Then what is the nature of this easement? What is the type of obstruction caused by the other party? These are to be taken and pleaded in the pleadings. I am stressing more upon the pleadings and pleadings because pleadings are very much important for the purpose of deciding even these reliefs in even the relief for even rectification of the contract or the other remedies also. Suppose if the party has taken the plea of fraud, whether he has complied with the provisions of Order 6 Rule CPC, which is the main requirement. So under the Specific Relief Act, the remedies are given, and this also provides the way of pleadings also. the requirements of the pleadings also. So this Bachad Nahar is pertaining to the easementary rights. Then Gujarat Bottling Company, it pertains to the conduct of the parties. Because I have already discussed, for granting this injunction, now we are touching this temporary injunctions order under order 39. This prima facie case, balance of convenience and irreparable loss. These are the three elements. But now the conduct of the parties, it is also relevant because the relief of injunction is an equitable relief, and the party who comes to the court, he should come with the clean hands. So the conduct of the parties is also relevant. The subsequent circumstances are also relevant regarding the parties are also relevant. Suppression of fact, that is also relevant. No, these are this is not the exhaustive list of the parameters while taking into consideration while granting the injunction. It all we can say. This again, Colgate Palmolive. This is the principles while granting the interim injunctions. This Dorab Kawasji case. Then principles for granting the mandatory injunction. In case of mandatory injunction, instead of prima facie case in favor of the plaintiff. This is the basic law. So these matters should not be taken lightly by the courts. Then this Ramchandar Bhim Singh judgment. This is a full bench pertaining to the sale of specific share by the co-sharer. It would help in decision of the cases regarding the alienation by the co-sharers. But now Jain Narayan's case, this is 2009 Honorable Supreme Court has also decided same controversy regarding the sale by the joint owner regarding this particular khasra numbers or more than their shares. Then Meharji Khewaji trust judgment, this is also pertaining to the construction and the alienation. This T Lakshmipati judgment, this is pertaining to the rights of the co-sharers. So these all important judgments should be handy. Now coming back to this provisions of the CPC. The provisions of order 39 rule 1 and 2, these are the basically procedural provisions, and the main provision is lying under section 94, which is the supplemental proceedings, and clause C is if it is prescribed, if it is so prescribed means prescribed under the CPC as per the definition of the CPC, that is grant a temporary injunction and in case of disobedience commit the person guilty thereof to the civil prison and order that his property be attached and sold. Now procedure has been given under order 39. Order 31 is having three clauses. First clause is pertaining to the damage, waste, alienation or wrongly property selling in the execution purposes. Clause 2 says for defrauding the interest of the credits, the stay can be granted. Clause C says whether if there is a dispute regarding the dispossession of the plaintiff, then injunction can be granted. These are the three clauses of order 39. Order 39(2) is the continuous breach of the causing the injury to the party, that is the plaintiff. Then 2A is pertaining to the breach of the this order of the injunction. Then 3, whether ex parte injunction can be granted or not. Now in the latest judgment, our Honorable High Court has dealt with the issue of this granting ex parte injunction. Okay, whether this order has been complied with or not. What happened in that case? The temporary injunction was granted by the court. This is judgment versus Panchayat Mahalla. But party order, no reasons for that order has been set aside by the Honorable High Court. Now it is the duty of the court to record the reasons for the urgency for granting the ex parte injunction and case the injunction is not granted, then the very object for granting the injunction would be defeated by delay and irreparable loss would be caused to the plaintiff. Whether this is the sufficient compliance. The sufficient compliance would be that if I would record the reasons that in this case the stay pertaining to the possession of the so and so has been claimed by this person, and if his possession is not protected and if he is dispossessed, then this would happen, and this is the urgent cause. So now this is the requirement. So depending upon the nature of this order, it also depends whether this is appealable order or whether this is a revisable order. If it does not disclose that it does not comply with the provisions of Rule 3, then it is appealable order. If it complies with the provisions of Rule 3, then this is the revisable order. As per this AIR 2000 Supreme Court 3032, this Venkata Subbiah versus Chalappan case. So Rule 4 of Order 39 pertains to the modification of the order of the stay order granted. If the party wants to vacate the stay, then he has the right to move an application under Rule 4. 5 is the order. This is applicable to the corporations also, and Rule 6 onwards, those are the temporary orders. Those are not pertaining to these injunction matters. So Rule 1 to Rule 5 of Order 39 pertains to the injunctions. Now the main crucial area in this part is Rule 2A. Now under Rule 2A, what happens? Now while deciding this matter, first of all, the disobedience, it is a criminal liability. The issue would be decided like criminal issues, that this liability should be proved beyond reasonable doubt. Number 1. Whether a person who is not a party to the suit, can proceedings be launched under Order 39 Rule 2A? Yes, the answer would be yes. If a person can be launched against him if he has willfully disobeyed the order. Even he can be pleaded as a party at any stage, or proceedings can be filed from the initial stage under Rule 2A. Now the next, if the suit is withdrawn, the proceedings under Order 39 2A would automatically go. If the suit is dismissed, same is the fate. Suppose an order temporary injunction, that is the ex parte order, has been passed, it has been confirmed. Instead of Order 39 Rule 2A, party comes and moves an application for police help for the restoration of that position which was disturbed after the passing of this order. Now the question arises whether that action, whether that power should be exercised by the trial courts. Now in the latest judgment in one of the districts of the Punjab, trial court has passed this order for providing the police help for the restoration of the position. That order was challenged before the Honorable High Court, and Honorable High Court has rather appreciated this order. Now the time has come. We are not the silent spectators to proceed with the proceedings of Order 39 Rule 2A. No doubt it is very difficult to exercise this power. First to order for the police help, then to restore the position status quo ante. But it is all within your jurisdiction and your power. This was all about this rule, order 39 rule 2A, and one area has been left, that is regarding the execution of the declaration and the executions of the this injunction decrees. So far as this execution of declaration, again coming back that uh, uh, other relief where the consequential benefits are not sought, then the decree is inexecutable. Simple decree for declaration is not executable. Other decrees are having no problem, where there is no dispute. The detailed procedure has been given under order 21, and even in the last lecture we have discussed all this. Other area is about this, the execution of this injunction decrees, that is order 21 rule 32. One is that is the remedy for the execution of these decrees under order 21 rule 32, and there is one clause also, clause 5, which further permits the granting of this mandatory or prohibitory injunctions. So again, those directions, after passing of that this judgment of this like permanent injunction, even injunction again can be granted for further clause says required, the required act, then that direction can be given. So the method of this execution is by way of attachment and by way of detention. Now the issue rises, okay, what is the procedure to be adopted? Because under the CPC or under order 21, the procedure given for detention, like in section 51 or 58, that is pertaining to the money decrees. Even order 21 rule 30 decrees. Now from where we can take the help for the implementation of the decrees of this permanent or this mandatory injunction for the purpose of detention? Now support from the judgments that the that is this 51, 58, that is order 37 to 40. So we can take the aid of those provisions. Now the next question arises whether those proceedings can be launched in the absence of the JD. The answer would be no. The court would first adopt all the means for proceeding against him for the purpose of detention, and even arrest warrants can be issued for the purpose of serving the show cause notice for the purpose of detention. That is, even in the latest judgment also, statewide detention order cannot be passed, and rather this procedure should be followed. So now I am going to conclude this topic. I have taken sufficient long time, but I have touched the main areas, those provisions relevant for the purpose of this trial purpose. That is, we have discussed about the remedy of this rectification, this rescission, then this cancellation. We have demarcated the area where it can be given, where it cannot be given, what are the main ingredients which are to be incorporated in the pleadings, what is the scope of section this 28, whether this extension can be granted, by which court it can be granted. Then the declaratory part, where what is the legal character, then what is this right to property, then perpetual injunctions, mandatory injunctions, then temporary injunctions which are covered by this order 39. So thank you so much for bearing me for such a long time. Now I would request Chetanji for calling the questions, please, sir.
So thank you so much, sir, for a detailed session. And I think a lot of questions were asked while you were talking. And now I think I've been also received the comments from the members saying that we have got our answer during in the same question. Because under the same question they have said that we got our answer. So I think I have to be really now be careful of what questions have been answered and what needs. So I'm gonna put up this question from Neeraj Goyal sir from Khanna district. You sir, in the last you were talking about mandatory injunction. So the question is pertaining to the same. If a person a person files a suit for mandatory injunction for seeking possession when he was required to file a suit for possession, then whether this suit for mandatory injunction can be dismissed being non-maintainable, and if yes, then whether its subsequent suit for possession will be hit by res judicata or not.
Regarding this mandatory injunction, this question is having two parts.
Yes.
Well, what is the nature of this possession, against whom possession has been sought? I have already discussed if it is regarding the license maintainable. The mandatory injunction is maintainable. And so far, suppose if it is dismissed that it is not maintainable on this technical ground, then if he is having the period of can also be filed. Even in that case, amendment can be allowed. So why so technical? Why we are so technical? No doubt I have given the instance of the Honorable Supreme Court in the cases of the specific performance. But in such like situations, it can be even like in the salary issue. We permit him to file for recovery suit. Next question, sir.
So I'll take the same. I'll take the question from Neeraj Goyal, sir. This is another question. The question is whether, for the purpose of Section 41, infrastructure project would also be include construction of the streets, as the schedule only words used are roads and bridges, but not streets. The difference is significant because usually dispute comes regarding the construction of streets.
No, if it involves the issue regarding the construction of street, whether it falls under that project, we have to see only roads and bridges. Road now, this is even street is also a road. No doubt the interpretation would come, but prima facie it appears that the street is also the part of this road. We can't say simply that this national highway roads or even street can be the part of this. The ultimately suppose if that street is hindering all the projects, suppose, right, then suppose if it impedes the progress of that project, then certainly it would come under the same domain. Now it would all depend upon the facts and circumstances of the case. On the basis of this fiction, we can't say straight away, but if it can be segregated from that, okay, it has nothing to do with the progress of the project. We depending upon the circumstances of the case. Thank you, Neil.
Okay, sir. Moving to the next question, sir. If the executant of document seeks declaration instead of cancellation of document, how court should proceed with this suit, whether suit would be maintainable or not?
Suit is basically maintainable. Okay, supposedly he has filed suit for declaration for the cancellation of that, but the law says that the frame of the suit should be seen. Even suppose he says suit for declaration to the effect that this document exhibit P1 like sale deed is a void document. Simple this suit. And now what is the nature of this suit? The pleadings would show that he has claimed the cancellation of that document. Now this heading of the plaint, it is not sufficient. By reading the whole of the pleadings, we can come to the conclusion that this is the suit for the cancellation of the sale deed. So it hardly makes any difference if he has no doubt the on this Surhit Singh judgment, that is for the purpose of this fixing court fee. So we should not be technical, but that is for the purpose of the interpretation for fixing the court fee. Yes, sir. Next question.
Sir, I think all the questions have already been answered. There's only one question left now because everyone has written that they have got the answers. Another question from Neeraj Goyal, sir. Talking about mandatory injunction, but now in respect to specific performance. The question is whether instead of suit for specific performance, a person files a suit for mandatory injunction for direction to the defendant to perform his part of the contract, then whether his said suit for mandatory injunction can be dismissed on the ground of non-maintainability. If yes, whether his subsequent suit for specific performance would be hit by the principle of res judicata. Something similar question that sir had asked last time, but now this time it's mandatory injunction and a specific performance suit being talked about.
See, in this case, he has filed suit for mandatory injunction.
Yes.
Right. But the remedy lies for the suit for specific performance.
Yes, sir.
Objection has been taken by the other side. Now he has not amended his suit. He has not taken anything despite the objection taken by the other party. Then his suit is not maintainable for mandatory injunction number 1. If his suit has been dismissed on the technical ground, that is only on this score that this suit is not maintainable, then again I have already replied that the second suit, if there is a period of limitation, then that can be filed.
Okay, sir. So I think that brings us to the end of the question answer round. I think you were saying that you took some time, but I think that extra time that you took had answered all the questions, because I saw that there were a lot of questions that were there, but members got their answers during
I would also like to add one thing more regarding these injunctions. In SARFAESI cases, basically, that is the Securitization Act. What happens? The party comes before the civil court, despite the proceedings launched under this Securitization Act. And suppose he claims that I am the tenant in so and so building, and by concealing all the facts regarding this, and the civil court assuming that he is the tenant in this building, grants generally ex parte stay. Now the issue arises, what is the remedy and what are the precautions to be taken by the courts? So I discussed this aspect with one of the judicial officers. Then he said that we used to do this procedure, that we used to write one line in the order that it would not affect the SARFAESI proceedings if those are pending. So this is also one of the innovative orders, basically, so as to continue with the proceedings under the Securitization Act. Because under the Securitization Act, the civil court is not having the jurisdiction. And even if there is a tenant in the building, the aspect of his tenancy is to be seen. Okay, whether it is after the mortgaging with the bank or it is before the mortgaging with the, if it is before the mortgage, the issue of atonement would come into picture. If it is after, then it is just to defraud or defeat the interest of the bank. And that issue is to be only seen by the district magistrate under the proceeding under the Securitization Act. So thank you so much, Chetanji.
Is there one more question? If you have time to take one more, sir. So whether suit for injunction seeking restraining order against the defendants from forcible recovery is maintainable or not?
Against?
Against the defendants from forcible recovery is maintainable or not?
Forcible recovery of?
So I'll repeat, the recovery is forcible recovery is maintainable or is not maintainable?
See, if it is recovery of the amount, then the suit is then the to any property. One area I have left, I would also like to touch that area. That is the injunction regarding the co-sharers. See, regarding injunction of co-sharers, one, there is a division bench of our Honorable High Court, that is Bachan Singh's judgment. So far, the areas of this injunction regarding co-sharers are concerned, we can categorize into 4 or 5 types. One is regarding possession, one is regarding construction, one is regarding alienation, one is regarding changing the nature of the suit land, one is regarding the enjoyment of the amenities by all the co-sharers. Suppose coming to this possession issue, if a co-sharer is in exclusive possession, only then he can claim the injunction against the other co-sharer. And so far as the possession of one co-sharer is concerned, he is deemed to be in joint possession with all the co-sharers. So he is not entitled for any injunction against the other co-sharers if he is not in the exclusive possession of the land. And the co-sharer who is not in the possession or who is out of possession, he can only claim the injunction if he is causing any or perverse to the rights of this co-sharer who is out of the possession. Then second, if he is diminishing the value and the injunction can be granted against him. If he is impairing the value of the property, then injunction can be granted against him, otherwise not. In case of construction is permissible to the co-sharer, like mere construction or improvements over the property are permissible as per the Bachan Singh judgment. But by way of construction, he can't change the nature of the land or such type of construction which is prejudicial to the rights of the other co-sharers. Third is alienation part. Alienation, co-sharer has every right to sell his own right. Own right means own share, but he can't sell the share of the other co-sharers. Like the share of the other co-sharers, even in the he is with the land more than his share. So if we want to grant the stay, we can grant the stay regarding the alienation more than his share. The next part is the changing of the nature of the land. Suppose he is removing the earth from the land. He has opened the dairy in the residential area. So it would affect the rights of the other persons also. Then the stay can be granted in such like situations. Now the use of the common facilities, in that instance, what happens? Suppose if the electric connection is in the name of one co-sharer, can other co-sharer be deprived of that right? So in the latest judgment, it has been held by our Honorable High Court that generally the electric connection is taken in the name of one person, and that is not the exclusive electric connection of one party. So it is to be ascertained or seen from the facts and circumstances of the case whether it is exclusively belonging to one party or it is such like situation. So every co-sharer has enjoy the facilities jointly with the other co-sharers. This is all about the rights of the co-sharers pertaining to the stays, basically. So now I would like to conclude. I think I have taken
Yes.
sufficient long time.
I know. So I think, sir, I will give a vote of thanks to all the judicial officers who have joined in from Punjab Haryana district courts, ladyships, lordships who have also taken time to come for the session. Special thanks to system officers of the court, the court bearers who helped the other judicial officers to connect and to to attend this particular webinar. And special thanks to Chandigarh Judicial Academy. Special thanks to Dr. Gopal Arora sir, to you sir, for taking out time and for taking the questions, every question, and answering all the questions in such a short and precise manner. So I think that brings us to the end of the session, sir. On behalf of Chandigarh Judicial Academy, on behalf of SCC Online, I would like to thank everyone. Again, Gopal Arora sir, and I would like to thank, and we'll see you in the next session with a new topic.
Chetanji, thank you so much. Thanks to all the participants who have joined this session, the lordships and the other my senior colleagues and my junior colleagues. And I am also thankful to our worthy director. And to the SEC group for giving us this opportunity, for giving this platform for the purpose of the discussion of the topics. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
So thank you. Okay, everyone, we will now conclude the session. We are ending the session now. Thank you.